I told the Xenia Daily Gazette in Ohio that I wouldn't have gone to war in Iraq. For one, we launched the war predicated on looking for weapons of mass destruction. Yet we have thousands of weapons of mass destruction aimed all over the world. Common sense would say this is, a bit of a duality. What if we let the weapons inspectors into Montana? I posed to an ABC TV news reporter from Toledo, Ohio. Estimates of Iraqi civilian deaths vary, but may well now be in the hundreds of thousands. I told the Athens News, also in Ohio, that what we so cavalierly call a war's inevitable collateral damage are moms, dads, little children. Our actions have destabilized Iraq, opening a wide door to sectarian civil war. Our actions have also galvanized jihad, or holy war alliances, and significant insurgency into Iraq. And it has stoked more and more anti-U.S. sentiment in the Arab world in general. We are looked at as occupiers interested in controlling Iraq oil. What's more, our use of depleted uranium munitions, bullets, and bunker-busting bombs is leaving Iraq radioactive in many spots and spiking the incidence of cancer and other diseases in the civilian population there. The Iraq War has diverted attention away from such international crises as the genocide in Sudan and diverted a tremendous amount of money that could have been used to cut world hunger, fight disease, help reverse global warming. At home, the Iraq War has meant U.S. military deaths and maiming, significant cuts to domestic social programs, increasing emotionally disturbed families from new cases of soldier post-traumatic stress syndrome, and on, and on, and on. So what's our plan? Well, in an overarching paradigm, we actually believe the situation could be turned into a tremendous positive for world peace. Really. As president, I would initially go to Iraq and offer a formal apology to the Iraqi people for the preemptive strike into their country and for all the civilian and military deaths. Sometimes, you've just got to admit you've made a mistake, and that applies whether you're an individual or a country. I would then set up an Iraq War Victims Family Fund, like the fund for the families of the September 11th victims. The fund would not only be intended for the families of the war victims, but the families of victims who died during these stringent decade-long sanctions on Iraq prior to the war. As the first part of a wave of tangible amends, I would propose not only nixing proposed uranium upgrades at billions of dollars of our current nuclear missiles, but I would propose unilateral disarmament of our existing nuclear weapons as well. And with all these savings, I'd fund, among other things, the rebuilding of Iraq's infrastructure. And I would propose the rebuilding contracts go primarily to Iraqi firms, not American firms. I would suspend the use of uranium-depleted munitions for good. And I would suspend torture of any terrorist insurgent suspects, in Iraq or out. I would call for a general populist vote in Iraq to see if a majority want us there at all. Either way, I would institute a U.S. troop incremental step down and ask for replacements with UN peacekeepers. But at the same time, I would incrementally start to dismantle the more than 100 bases we've established in Iraq. Our administration's paradigm would not be to have presence there so we could protect America's interests. Read, at least in part, oil. To help individual Iraqis recover, I would suggest the Iraqi populace get individual yearly oil revenue dividends, like every Alaskan currently gets. And I would propose America matches these dividends for the next 5 years. I would propose this money come from a federal tax on gasoline in America. Most Americans, in a de facto way, are partially responsible for the Iraq war because of our dependence on foreign oil. This, in turn, drives policy decisions like going into Iraq, I believe. Our administration will work stridently to move America away from dependence on foreign and domestic oil, and all that brings: pollution, global warming, urban sprawl. And we would exhort people to sacrifice when it comes to energy use and switch to alternative forms of energy, whether wind, solar, geothermal. I would also set up a division within the State Department specifically for Iraq refugees. There are currently 1.8 million Iraqis who have fled the country, and I would relax criteria for them if they wanted to resettle in the United States. I would also suggest much more funding for those who want to eventually resettle back in Iraq from any part of the world. In addition, I would request additional funding for such non-governmental agencies as the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants to help Iraqi refugees as well. In the aftermath of the Iraq War, to help quell some of the residual sectarian strife, I would urge and seek funding for such initiatives as Truth and Reconciliation that work so well in the relatively bloodless aftermath of the transition from apartheid in South Africa. And in tandem, I would look to institute a version of the Ulster Project, which has been successful in reversing some of the prejudice and hate for future generations of Northern Ireland youth. I believe a similar initiative would work with Sunni and Shiite youth. Through the U.S. Department of Peace that we propose, I would also recommend setting up an Iraq-U.S. Sister Cities project to mobilize even more help into that country and start to establish better international relations. American cities with the same size and demographics could pair with similar Iraqi cities and towns to establish a conduit of funds, cultural exchange, trips, etc. And it is my belief that as the rest of the Middle East saw our earnest efforts at apology, amends, and peace building, some of the tension and anti-U.S. sentiment would ease, and as a domino effect, some of the terrorism threats would diminish as well. What's more, the world would come closer together.